Shalom, peace, and blessings. Welcome to the Fourth Angels Learning Center. My name is Jadiel, and today we are going to be touching on another missing link. There seems to be a lot of confusion. There seems to be a lot of misunderstanding, mishandling of the scripture. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to clarify many different things, especially pertaining about the timing of the feast, the timing of a day. All of those things are connected together. If you know the timing of the feast, you're going to run in to how they counted the day or how they reckoned the day. So one thing that I want to show is that the feast of Passover and unleavened bread are the same feast. They are not two separate feasts. Moses did not teach that they were two separate feasts. Okay? So we will see that scripture will teach that the feast of unleavened bread is the same as the feast of Passover, and Passover is the same as the feast of unleavened bread. And we're going to show, scripture is going to show why they are the same feasts. They are not two separate feasts. There's also a misunderstanding about the priests in John chapter 18 and 19 about how they didn't want to go into the courts of Pilate because they wanted to eat the Passover. They did not want to be defiled so they could eat the Passover. And I'm going to show some clarification on that based off of what Israel practiced in the book of Chronicles. So we are going to look at these things. What we have to stop doing is establishing doctrine based off of witnesses' accounts of the New Testament. The New Testament are either demonstrating the lies and false doctrines that they are following, which Messiah had to deal with when he constantly said, "You err according to the scripture," or it's showing what they believed and what they lived according to the Torah that was established by Moses and the prophets in times past. So when we're looking at the New Testament, we have to understand what was established in time past in order to establish what they were practicing, what righteous people were practicing in the New Testament. You cannot set up an established idea from the New Testament. You can confirm an idea from the New Testament, but you can't establish it because the commandments, the laws, the ordinances, the statutes, the judgments, those are the things that establish what needs to be done in the New Testament. This is the only way that we can determine what is a prophet. This is the only thing that allows us to understand how did Israel fall? How did Israel slip from the commandments? How did they turn away from Yah? The law and the prophets is how we determine everything. So when we're looking at the New Testament, we have to base the New Testament off of what was established by Moses. If not, we're going to be doing what we're doing now. We're going to have all these different confusing thoughts. You're going to need like 50 different mystery books to help establish what Moses was trying to say. So what we want to do is we want to look at the scripture and see what Yah gave to Moses. And then we're going to establish what was in the New Testament. Okay? So before we get started, I want to remind everybody, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, click the notification bell and the like button. A big way to help our ministry is to share this content, to allow it to reach as many people as it can by our efforts. So without further ado, let's get started. So again, we're going to show that the Passover and unleavened bread is the same feast, and that the 14th at even is merged together with the 15th day of the month. So the 14th at evening and the 15th day of the month are merged together in this celebration of Passover, in the eating of the lamb. And we're going to see that in Exodus 12. So let's start with Exodus 12 first, and then we're going to look at a few more scriptures elsewhere. All right. So let's start with Exodus 12, right? So let's look at this. So he's telling them when to actually kill the Passover. So in verse 6, it says, you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. The whole assembly of the congregation shall kill it in the evening. Now, again, I did a study called What is the Evening? What is the even or the evening? The evening is not sunset. In that video, we established that the evening was about 3 to 4 hours before sunset, which is what they refer to as the 9th hour. Okay? So it says that you should keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole congregation shall kill it at the 9th hour, or what they refer to as evening. The Hebrew word areb. Now, when they kill it 3 to 4 hours before sunset, look at what it says in verse 8. They shall eat the flesh in that night, meaning sunset. So this word here is areb, meaning twilight or growing dark. This word here is lail, meaning dark or night. Two different time periods. One is the 9th hour, one is sunset. This is when they should eat the Passover. Passover was eaten at sunset, and we're going to see what the scriptures tell us this day is at sunset. It says, you shall roast it with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs you shall eat it. Okay? Now, the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on the 15th, but if you notice, when they eat the Passover, it was supposed to be eaten with unleavened bread. But let's continue to look at this. Let's scroll down. Let's look at verse 11. It says, you shall eat it with your loins girded, shoes on your feet, staff in your hand. You shall eat it quickly. It is Yah's Passover. Okay? It says, I will pass through the land of Egypt this night. So it's the same night that they're eating the Passover. Okay? Keep this in mind. So the day of the 14th at even, Passover is killed, and then they're eating it at night, and that same night, Yah will pass through the land of Egypt. He not only will pass through, he will smite the firstborn of the land of Egypt, both man and beast, against the gods of Egypt. He will execute judgment. I am Yahuwah, he says. Okay? He says, the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. It says, this day shall be unto you a memorial. It's interesting because he's going to pass through that night. But he said that this day, the day, that word is Yom, the day which when Yahuwah passes through that night or that day is going to be a memorial. It says that you shall keep it a feast unto Yahuwah unto your generations. Now watch this. You shall keep this day, right? The night that he passed through Egypt and plagued and destroyed Egypt. It says, this day will be a memorial for you, and you shall keep it a feast. Look at what it says in verse 15. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses, for whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day unto the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. This is very interesting because he just finished telling us that the day that he passes through the land of Egypt, which is the night that they ate the Passover, was to be kept as a memorial and was supposed to be kept as a feast unto Yah. And then he starts to describe this feast as 7 days of unleavened bread. What day is the 7th day? What days does this feast start? This feast starts on the 15th. So he's referring to the memorial of the time, that night that they ate the Passover and he passed over them. This night was also referred to as the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is the memorial. This is not the 14th. It's not a separate feast from the 15th. It is merged together. But let's continue to look at how Moses is told by Yah that these two time periods are merged together. It says, in the first day, there shall be a holy convocation, the first day of unleavened bread. And in the 7th day, there shall be a holy convocation unto you. No manner of work shall be done in them except that which every man must eat. That's the only thing that must be done for you. It says, you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. Now watch this. In the self same day that I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. So the feast of unleavened bread is the same day that he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Let's check that out. Well, Moses tells us again in Numbers 33:3, they departed from Ramses in the month of the 15th day of the month. And then it says the morrow after the Passover, referring to the morrow after the Passover was killed. The children of Israel went out on a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians. Now, what part of the day did they leave? Did they leave during the daytime, or did they leave on the 15th at night? Deuteronomy 16, these are all the words of Moses. Deuteronomy 16, verse 1, it says, observe the month of Abib, keep the Pesach, the Passover, unto Yahuah your Elohim, for in the month of Abib, Yah your Elohim brought you forth out of the land of Egypt by night. Brought you out of the land of Egypt by night. Very important for us to grasp that. Okay? So the 15th day at night is when they left. But you know that this night was the same night that they ate the Passover and that they girded their loins waiting for Yah to pass over them that same night. So it shows us that they ate the Passover at night on the 15th day of the month. Not only does it show that the 14th has just ended and they entered into the 15th day of the month, it shows that the day starts at sunset, not even sunset. Let's continue to see the merging of the 14th day at even with the 15th day by Moses. Let's look at this. So again, it says here, we're going to look at verse 17. It says, you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this self same day I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day in your generations for an ordinance forever. Look at what it says. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. 7 days. But wait a minute. The 7 days, doesn't the 7 days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread start on the 15th day of the month? The 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21. From the 15th to the 21st, this is 7 days. From the 14th to the 21st, this is 8 days. So what is the scripture saying? That the 14th day of the month at even is a preparation time for the Passover meal. This is when the Passover was killed. It was killed, it was roasted, but they did not eat it until the commencing of the first day of unleavened bread, which was at night. This is what it says up here in Exodus 12, looking at verse 6 to 8. You shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. The whole congregation shall kill it in the evening. And then it says in verse 8, they shall eat the flesh that night. As we continue to see that night that they're eating the flesh, they were supposed to eat it with their loins girded in haste, because that meal was Yah's Passover. And that he will pass over the land of Egypt that same night that they ate the Passover. But not only would he pass over the Israelites the same night they ate the Passover, he would also execute judgment on Egypt, and he would deliver his houses, deliver Yah's people out of the land of Egypt. This was the beginning of the 15th day of the month, which is why the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the self-same day that they was taken out of Egypt. The first day of unleavened bread, according to Numbers 33:3 and according to Exodus 12, it is the 15th day of the month that they left, and they left at night, which was right after they killed the Passover. But let's continue to look at this verse right here in verse 18. It says that the 14th day of the month at even, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month. It's not talking about the whole entire 14th day of the month. It's talking about the very end of that time. Because it's talking about the very end of that time, it wasn't considered to be a whole day. It was a transition period. So with that, let me show this, because I have a video called The 12 Hours in a Day, and it shows how the ancient Israelites told time, because they tracked the sun, and they were able to see how many hours, which was 12 hours or 12 points of the sun. And so we already established that the 9th hour was what they refer to as evening. Okay. So we're gonna see if we could pull this up. Now, this is a diagram that we did in the 12 hours study. Okay. Let's look at this. Here we go. So look at this. This is the 9th hour. This is when evening starts. This is the 14th day. It starts, right? 14th day at even. And then it says that they were supposed to eat it at night. This same night was the night that Yah passed over them and delivered their houses out of Egypt. This night, Numbers 33:3, referred to as being the 15th day of the month. Now, if this is the 14th day of the month and this is the 15th day of the month, that means that the day, the day cycle, I'm not going to say 24-hour cycle because people get caught up on that. I don't agree with that either. So the day cycle, which is night and day, right? This is what is occurring. After this day is completed at sunset, it commences the same night that they ate the Passover, that Yah passed over and brought the plague on Egypt, and he delivered their houses on the 15th, that night, the 15th, on the first day of unleavened bread. Okay? So this is what it says clearly here. So I do want to show that this understanding has been perpetuated throughout history. The Israelites of the scriptures did not lose sight of this understanding. Whatever they did here is what they would perpetuate later on. Now, there were more instructions given after they left Egypt. When they went to Mount Sinai, they were given the Levitical priesthood. They were given a sacrificial system on how to observe these feasts and all these different things. So we're going to take a look at these things. Okay, so we already established 14th day at even was merged with the first day of unleavened bread, which is why the first day of unleavened bread is referred to as the feast and not the 14th at even. It also uses this terminology when you look at Leviticus 23. Let's go to Leviticus 23. It uses this terminology when it starts out with Passover. It says the 14th day of the first month is Yah's Passover. He's referring to the animal. The animal is sacrificed. Then it says on the 15th day of that same month is the feast. It's interesting that it doesn't stop. It's a continuation. The 14th day at even goes into the night of the 15th day. The observation of the first day of unleavened bread has to be at night, according to Exodus 12. Let's go back to that. Exodus 12 tells us that the observation is at night. Let's look at this. So we see here clearly midnight, Yah smote the land of Egypt that night. Pharaoh called Egypt, Moses and Aaron by night. We see that here, verse 31. But if we move further down, we'll see how Yah wants us to observe it. It says here, it came to pass that at the end of the 430 years, the self same day, it came to pass that all the host of Yah went out from the land of Egypt. Now, did they leave it during the day or during the night? Verse 42. It is a night much to be observed by yahuah for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. So they were brought out of the land of Egypt that same night, which was the first day of unleavened bread, which is why he told them to keep it for a memorial. It says, again, confirming this is that night of yahuah to be observed by all the children of Israel in their generations. The first day of unleavened bread is to be observed at night because it was at night that they ate the Passover. It was at night that Yah passed over the children of Israel and brought the plague down on Egypt. And it was by night that he delivered them out of the land of Egypt on the night of the 15th, which is right after they killed the Passover at the 14th at even. I hope that this makes sense. I hope this is bringing it a little bit more clear. Now, we're going to see that this is consistent throughout Scripture. We're also going to see the Messiah ate the Passover. Okay? Now, because he ate the Passover doesn't mean that he did not become the Passover or he didn't die as a Passover. He was the Passover. And the priests is the ones that delivered this Passover offering, and we're going to see that all the sacrifices that was made during the Feast of Unleavened Bread was referred to as Passover offerings or Pesachs. Let's look at it, or Pesakim. Let's look at this a little bit deeper. So we're establishing a lot of things with Moses alone, but let's look at the Chronicles. Let's look at the Second Chronicles chapter 26. Chapter 36. This is during the time of, I'm sorry, not 36, 35. This is the time of King Josiah. He wanted to keep the Passover unto Yah. And look what he says. It says they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the month. Let's read through this chapter and we're going to see clearly. Let me make this big. When we read through this chapter, we're going to see clearly that Israel's perspective of Passover and unleavened bread was that it was the same. Everything that was done on the Feast of Unleavened Bread or on those 7 days were referred to as Passovers. So when the priest delivered Messiah during the first day of Unleavened Bread, it was because he was a sacrifice that they were offering. He was a Passover offering delivered to the nations on the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Passover that the priest was trying to eat, we're going to see this very clear because they were the priests that delivered him. It was the priest that delivered Messiah to Pilate. Caiaphas and the priests and the chief priest and the high priest. It was the priests that wanted to eat the Passover at the temple. And we're going to see that Moses commanded that to be done on the first day of unleavened bread. Let's take a look. Let's read through Josiah's experience so we can get a little bit more insight as to what the Israelites was understanding already. This is what they were understanding already. So let's look at this. Josiah kept the Passover unto Yahuah in Jerusalem, and they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. Look at what he says. And he set the priests in their charges and encouraged them to the service of the house of Yah. So this is what we're going to hear about, the services that were supposed to be done at the temple. He said unto the Levites that taught all Israel, which were holy unto Yah, put the holy ark in the house which Solomon the son of David, king of Israel, did build. It shall not be a burden upon your shoulders. Serve now Yahuwah your Elohim and his people Israel. It says, prepare yourselves by the houses of your fathers. He's still talking to the Levites now. After your courses, according to the writing of David, king of Israel, and according to the writing of Solomon his son. Stand in the holy place according to the divisions of the families of the fathers of your brethren, the people, and after the division of the families of the Levites. So kill the Passover, right? So he's telling them, kill the Passover. Remember, the whole congregation, according to Exodus 12, the whole congregation is supposed to kill the Passover at even. Then it says, sanctify yourselves and prepare your brethren that they may do according to the word of Yah by the hand of Moses. So we're going to see, what did Moses command the Levites to do? What did Moses command the Levites to do? What service did he command them to do on the Passover? Let's continue. It says, Josiah gave unto the people of the flock lambs and kids, all for the Passover offerings, right? For all that were present. And then he says, to number 30,000, 3,000 bullocks. These were the king's substance. Let's continue to read, right? Bullocks. Keep that in mind. It says, and his princes gave willingly unto the people, to the priests. So this is what they gave to the priests and to the Levites. Hilkiah and Zechariah, Yehiel, rulers of the house of Elohim, gave unto the priests for the Passover offerings 2,600 small cattle and 300 oxen. Now this is interesting. Why would the Passover offerings be oxen and bullocks? Let's go back to Exodus real quick. Exodus chapter 12. Where does Yah tell us to take the offering for Passover from as a congregation? Remember, as a congregation, what are we supposed to take? It says here, on this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of the fathers, a lamb for a house, right? This is what it's supposed to say. Your lamb shall be without blemish. It says, you shall take it. This is verse 5 of Exodus 12. You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. There's no command for the congregation to use bullocks or oxen. But we weren't talking about the congregation. We were talking about the Levites, the priests, the service, according to 2 Chronicles 35:2, the service of the house of Yah. So let's continue to look at this, and we're going to see where Moses commanded for these bullocks and oxen to be offered, especially since they're referred to as Passover offerings. Let's continue. Verse 9, it says, Conaniah, Shemaiah, Nathaniel, his brethren, Hashabiah, Yehiel, Yozabad, chief of the Levites, right, gave unto the Levites for Passover offerings 5,000 small cattle and 500 oxen. Here we go again. And then it says, so the service was prepared. The priests stood in their place and the Levites in their courses according to the king's command. Now we're going to have to see, when did Moses command the priests to do something very specific with things that they refer to as Passover offerings? Let's look at this. Now they killed the Passover, right? The whole congregation, and the priests sprinkled the blood from their hands, and the Levites flayed them. They removed the burnt offerings that they might give according to the divisions of the families of the people to offer unto Yah, as it is written in the book of Moses. And so did they with the oxen. They roasted the Passover with fire according to the ordinance, but the other holy offerings, which we saw they refer to as Passovers, they put it in pots, cauldrons, pans, and they divided them speedily among all the people. Afterward, they made ready for, what does it say? For themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the sons of Aaron, were so busy offering the burnt offerings and the fat until the night. Therefore, the Levites prepared for themselves and for the priests and the sons of Aaron. It talks about the singers being prepared as well, but it's really focusing in verse 16. It says, so the service of Yah was prepared the same day to keep Passover and to offer burnt offerings upon the altar of Yah according to the commandment of the king Josiah. Now we know that this commandment is not really according to the commandment of the king, but according to what was written in the book of Moses. Let's look down. Verse 17. Children of Israel that were present kept the Passover at that time and the Feast of Unleavened Bread 7 days. This whole time frame was kept 7 days. There was no Passover like it that kept Israel from the day of Samuel the prophet. Now, what commandment, according to what it says here in verse 12, what commandment of offerings that they refer to as Passover offerings, when did the priests get commanded by Moses to offer Passover offerings? Let's go to the book of Numbers. See, we have to establish everything with Moses. The more that we go towards the New Testament to establish a doctrine, is the more people are going to come up with crazy doctrines. Numbers chapter 28. These are the offerings: daily offerings, Shabbat offerings, monthly offerings, Passover offerings. What does it say to do on the 14th day? It says the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of yahuah, referring to the lamb or the goats. Does it say anything that the priest should do here? Nope. It goes right into the 15th day of the month is the feast. Is the feast. 7 days you shall be eating unleavened bread. Now remember, the 14th at evening is merged together with the first day of unleavened bread. Now look at what has to be done on the days of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. In the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no manner of servile work. You shall offer sacrifices made by fire for a burnt offering unto yahuah, 2 young bullocks, 1 ram, 7 lambs, right? Then you have the grain offering, flour mingled with oil, 2/10 deals you shall offer for a bullock, and 2/10 deals for a ram. Remember, they gave small cattle, goats, lambs, rams, and then they also gave from the herd oxen and bullocks. Several 10th deals shall you offer for every lamb throughout the 7 lambs. Remember, 7 days. They had to do this every day for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. 1 goat for a sin offering to make an atonement for you. Now, this is what was occurring This sacrifice had to be done on the 15th day of the month, as we saw here. The 15th day, which is the first day of unleavened bread during the feast. There had to be an atoning sin offering that was offered. Guess who that was manifested by? Messiah was this atoning sin offering that was also referred to as a Passover offering. Every sacrifice that was made from the 15th to the 21st day of the first month was referred to as a Passover offering. It says, you shall offer these beside the burnt offering in the morning, which is the continual burnt offering. After this manner, you shall offer daily. You should do the same thing every day throughout the 7 days. The food offering, the food of the sacrifice made by fire, the sweet fragrance unto Yah, it shall be offered beside the continual burnt offering and his drink offering. On the 7th day, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work. So the Passover offerings were executed all throughout the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So the priest that was given Passover offerings to offer as the service in 2 Chronicles chapter 35, during the time of Josiah, those Levites and those priests were offering Passovers throughout the whole Feast of Unleavened Bread. The whole entire feast was referred to as Passovers. Every sacrifice that they offered was referred to as a Passover offering. The priests, even though they offered this sin offering to make an atonement, they also had to eat this offering, which is what we see in John chapter 18 and 19, that the priests did not want to be defiled because they wanted to eat this offering. Let's look at that. John 18, right? Let's look at it. John 18, verse 28. It says here, then they led Yahushua from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. They themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. So they wanted to eat the Passover offerings that was due to them. It was all the priests. Let's start from the top of John 18. It was all the priests. So Judas betrayed him to the priests, right? They took him to the high priest's home, Caiaphas' home. Let's look at this. Caiaphas, which was the high priest at that time. They went into the palace of the high priest, verse 15. I'm going to skim through a little bit so that way we can move forward. So if you read this whole chapter, as well as the next chapter, you'll see that the priests was the ones handling him, the servants of the high priest, being his kinsmen. All right. And then they went to the judgment hall. We're also going to see this also continue in the very next chapter. Let's look at this. John chapter 19. Look at what it says. Verse 6, when the chief priests saw, therefore, and the officers saw him, they cried out, crucify him, crucify him. You see that? It was the chief priest. It was the high priest. They were all instigating the death of Messiah. They were giving him as an offering. He was being given as an offering to be prepared for the people. Verse 14 says, it was the preparation of the Passover, just like how you saw the priests and the Levites preparing to offer the service of Yah. This is what was being done during this time. It was the preparation of the Passover about the 6th hour. Now, this is an indicator of time. This is talking about noon. So what was to be prepared on the first day of unleavened bread, referred to as Passover? Let's go back. What were they doing? 2 Chronicles chapter 35. What were they preparing? He gave them their charges. He set the priests in their charges and encouraged them to the service of the house of Yah. Let's look at what they did. They sanctified themselves, and they had to prepare their brethren, right? And they started to receive all these bullocks, thousands of bullocks, lambs, goats, rams, oxen. They started to get all of these things, and then look at what it says here. So the service was prepared. They had to start preparing for the service of the Pesach on the first day of unleavened bread, according to Moses. They had to prepare all these sacrifices. How did they prepare all these sacrifices? Look at what it says. They had to cut them up. They had to separate certain organs. This is how they offered the sacrifices at the temple. So the chief priest, the high priest, they were all, according to John 19, it was the preparation, right? Let me see if I can find it. It was the preparation of the Passover at the 6th hour. They had to prepare those Passover offerings on the 15th day of the month. These priests did not have to prepare. There was no day of preparation for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because we clearly saw in Exodus 12 that unleavened bread was a day in which you was allowed to prepare your meals. So they were not in preparation of that, but they were in preparation of the Passover offerings that was offered at the temple. This is what was going on. Okay? So the Chronicles, they understood this. This was established. This is what they had to prepare. In John chapter 18 and 19, that's what they had to prepare. And why did he not want to get defiled? Because according to Leviticus, that atoning goat, that sin offering that was given on the 15th, 16th, all the way from the 15th to the 21st, all of those, there was a portion of those sacrifices that was given to the priests. And let's look at that. Leviticus chapter 6. This is the law of the burnt offering, right? Let's continue to look at this. The meal offering, the bread offering, and look what it says. The remainder, Aaron and his sons shall eat with unleavened bread. It shall be eaten in the holy place, and in the court of the tabernacle of congregation they shall eat it. Let's continue it. It says, all the males from among the children of Aaron, the priests, shall eat it. It shall be a statute forever in your generations concerning the offerings of Yah made by fire. Every one that touches them shall be holy. This is what they wanted to eat. They knew that in the eyes of the people, if they were eating these things in the court of the temple in front of everybody, that they would be looked at as holy, because this is what it says. Everyone that touches these meals is holy. Let's continue to see. This is exactly what they ate. And then look what it says. The priest that offers it for sin shall eat it. In the holy place it shall be eaten in the court of the tabernacle of the congregation. Very clear. All the males of the priest shall eat thereof. It is most holy. So what are we saying? Passover and unleavened bread is the same thing. The timing is also revealed in the same exact thing. The same exact timing, the same exact instruction is revealing the time of how a day is set up, what was done, the 14th at even and the 15th being merged together as one feast, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The priests in John chapter 18 and 19 was not wanting to get defiled because they wanted to eat these Passover offerings that was designated for the priests. This is what they wanted to eat. 2 Chronicles chapter 35 refers to all of those sacrifices that was done as Passover offerings. And according to the law of Moses, those offerings did not have to start until the 15th day of the month. What does this bring us to? It brings us to the Messiah. Let's see. Now, we did a study on the timing. So I'm just going to go through this real quick. Matthew chapter 27, we're going to go through this real quick because it's very clear. It's very clear what Torah teaches the New Testament has to perform. Yahushua had to keep the feast. Now look at what it says here. Now the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Yahushua and said, where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover? He said the first day of unleavened bread. Now we know that the 14th day at even is merged with the first day of unleavened bread. So this is the language that they're using. The first day of unleavened bread, where do you want us to go and prepare to eat the Passover? He tells them to go into the man's house. He says, this is where I will keep the Passover at your house. And he says, and the disciples did as Yahushua had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. You know what that means? Made ready the Passover means that they killed the lamb or the goat, and they cooked it, they roasted it to prepare it for that night. This is Matthew chapter 26. Mark 14 says the same thing. Let's look at Mark 14. The first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, referring to the 14th at even, because they merged that time with the 15th day of the month, because the day started at night, a day cycle, not the daytime. I'm not talking about the daytime. It's obvious that the daytime starts when the sun rises. This is not what it's talking about. First day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, is the talking about that time of the 14th merged with the first day of unleavened bread. It says, where do you want us to go that we may prepare, that you may eat the Passover? So the Passover is referring to the meal, not the 14th day. It says, where is the guest chamber where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you the large upper room, furnished and prepared, and there you will make ready for us. And his disciples went forth, came into the city, found as he has said, and they made ready the Passover. All right, let's look at one more. Luke is interesting. It says, now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called Passover. So you see, the Israelites at this time is still understanding what the Israelites understood in Chronicles during King Josiah's day. They are still understanding what was commanded to Moses at Exodus, that the feast of unleavened bread and Passover was called the same thing. It was called the same thing. Let's scroll down to the preparation now. Then came the day of unleavened bread when the Passover must be killed. So you notice that they keep saying that the day the Passover was killed was also referred to as the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because they merged the end of the 14th at even. They merged the 14th at even with the night of the 15th. Let's continue. It says, and Peter John saying, go and prepare for us the Passover that we may eat, referring to the animal. The Passover is the animal. They didn't prepare a day. They prepared the animal. And it says, and they said, where shall we go to prepare? And he tells them the same thing that we read. He says here in verse 11, where I shall eat the Passover with my disciples. And it says, and they went and they found as he has said, and they made ready the Passover. And when the hour was come, they sat down, and the 12 apostles with him. And he says, with desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. He told them he was going to eat the Passover. This is what they ate. They ate this Passover. This is what they ate. Okay? So he took the cup after supper. So after they ate, he took the cup. He took the bread, and then he took the cup. Because remember, they had to eat the Passover with unleavened bread. This is the first day of unleavened bread. So if this is the first day of unleavened bread at night, when did they crucify Messiah? The 15th day, the first day of unleavened bread during the day. When did he die? He died at the 9th hour when they were to offer the atoning sacrifice, the sin offering. This is when he died. The priest offered him to the nations to be killed. It was the priest that offered him as a sacrifice. And he was a Passover because the priest offered this Passover to the nations to be killed. Very, very, very simple. So in John chapter 18 and 19, what were they preparing to eat? They were preparing to eat the Passover that was offered on the 15th day of the month. Now that we went from Torah to the New Testament, there's no deviation. You can't use the New Testament to now tell them what Moses was doing. Moses, Josiah, Israel told us what Israel was doing in the New Testament. So now that he ate the Passover and died on the 15th, what was the Shabbat that was coming? The Shabbat that was coming was the 7-day Shabbat. Now, 7-day Shabbat landed on the 16th day of the month because he died on the 15th day of the month. Bottom line. Now, if there's anything that may be out of whack, any scripture that has given that does not give the clarity on the timing of the day, the 14th and the 15th being the same feast, the consistent timing of when the priest was supposed to offer their special services on Passover, their Passover offerings for the services of the temple, according to Numbers 28, 2 Chronicles 35. If there's anything that have deviated from scripture, please let me know so we can clarify, so I can look over it, clarify, because this is one of the biggest things that's separating all feast keeping Torah observant believers. The idea, 14th, 15th, 15th is Shabbat, he had to die over here. No, the Passover that was offered on the 15th was also referred to as Passovers as well. And he was offered to the nations by the priests. The priests actually gave him to be killed as a offering. So we have to understand he is still the Passover. Just because he didn't die on the 14th, he's still the Passover, because the Passovers were killed on the 15th as well. And he was killed and offered up by the priest on the 15th. So if there's anything that deviates from scripture, please let me know. We are here to try to clarify, to bring understanding, to repair the breach. This is our whole purpose. This is what Yah set this ministry for. Is to establish what is true, is to straighten out those crooked ways, and is to allow scripture to give us everything that we need in order to walk the narrow path. All right. So shalom. I hope that you guys have a blessed day. I hope that this was a blessing, and I hope to hear from you. Shalom. Shalom, shalom. Thank you guys for joining our study today. I hope that it was edifying. And if you want to support this ministry, you can support us on 4alc.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube page. Click the like button and the notification bell. I hope to see you guys on the next study. Shalom, guys.